I still remember the first time my brother really hurt me, not just with words, though those came first, sneaking into my life like poison, whispering insults when he thought I wasn't listening. I was 11 and he was 16, and for the first few years, I thought maybe it was normal sibling teasing. I thought maybe all older brothers picked on their younger siblings. But the moment he started calling me gay slurs, the moment he mocked me for the way I looked, something inside me shifted. It wasn't teasing. It wasn't normal. It was intentional, and it cut deeper than I had any words for at the time, at first. It was small things, name-calling, snide remarks, pushing me when no one was looking. Then it became worse. He waited until I was alone, cornered me in hallways, in the kitchen, in our shared spaces, and started attacking. Fists to my body, kicks to my legs, trying to break my hands, hitting me so hard I felt the breath leave my lungs. He didn't stop, and every time he did it, I hated myself a little more. I hated that I let it happen. I hated that I had to go home every day and look at him like he wasn't a monster. When I came out, I thought, at least, maybe he would stop saying things about my identity. Maybe he'd leave me alone about something so personal. But no, that only escalated his cruelty. Suddenly, the verbal attacks had a direction, a venomous purpose. He started saying things I can't even fully repeat, telling me I should re-out to old men, that I would at least make money being a freak. It was calculated. He wanted to break me down, and in those moments, I felt broken beyond repair. I didn't tell anyone because I thought no one would understand, and even if they did, what could they do? My parents weren't allies, they were always half on my side, half hoping I'd be someone else, hoping maybe I'd change or disappear or just stop existing in the way that angered them. I tried to hide it. I tried to be quiet. But he found ways to attack that went beyond the physical. He made my life a living nightmare. Every day was an exercise in survival, and I learned quickly to read his moods, to know which corners of the house were safe, which doors he might kick open. School offered a little respite, but even there, he found ways to make me feel unsafe. Teachers knew. The guidance counselor knew, and every so often, CPS would get involved. But it never amounted to anything real. Nothing ever changed. I was left to navigate the chaos on my own, always expecting the next punch, the next kick, the next word meant to scar me. I watched as my best friend started spending time with him 2 years ago. I noticed the subtle shift, the way our conversations became shorter, the way laughter in the hallways turned into awkward silences. I tried to fight for our friendship, tried to explain to him what my brother was like, but he couldn't or wouldn't see it. My best friend and my brother became inseparable, and I was left on the outside, feeling abandoned and angry. I tried to let it go, to make new friends, but the betrayal stung so much I couldn't help but replay it in my mind over and over. The parents of my former best friend asked me to reconsider, begged me not to give up, and even tried to protect me from my brother, warning me behind the scenes that he was dangerous. I didn't listen. I wanted someone who didn't fraternize with someone like my brother. 2 years of silence followed, filled with quiet resentment and the constant heavy weight of my brother's presence in the background of my life. Home was no sanctuary. My parents knew what was happening. They saw the bruises, the cuts, the fear in my eyes. Sometimes they intervened in small ways. Sometimes they yelled at him, but it never lasted. They didn't want me to be gay, and maybe that made their support feel hollow, like they were doing the bare minimum to appear as though they cared. I learned to depend on no one, to keep a mask on that made it look like I was okay. Teachers and counselors were watchful, but they couldn't fix the pattern. It was exhausting, waking up every morning knowing the day could end in more pain, more humiliation, more fear. I became skilled at hiding my feelings, at pretending nothing hurt when everything did. By the time I was 16, the bullying had become physical, psychological, and relentless. He didn't just punch or kick me anymore. He had started to terrorize me in ways I could barely comprehend. I learned the layout of the house, the way he moved, the moments when he might strike. I became hyper-aware, constantly anxious, constantly bracing for impact. There were nights I couldn't sleep, nights I cried quietly in the dark, trying to make myself smaller, hoping he wouldn't notice my fear. And yet, despite all this, I kept trying to survive, kept trying to believe that someone would see the truth of what I was enduring. That hope kept me alive, even when everything else felt like it was falling apart. I've tried to explain to people what it's like to live in that constant state of danger, but words fail. They think of fights or arguments, not the slow, suffocating fear that seeps into your bones. The subtle ways abuse chips away at your confidence, your sense of self, your understanding of what love and care can even be. When my best friend distanced himself, when my parents faltered, when the world outside school and home seemed indifferent, I felt invisible. I felt like my suffering was irrelevant. And that invisibility, that weight, became a part of who I was, shaping how I saw myself and the world around me. Even now, I remember moments that cut deeper than any physical wound. The day he cornered me in the kitchen, smirking as he pushed me against the counter, taunting me about who I was, who I loved, the cruel laughter in his voice echoing in my ears. I remember trying to dodge, trying to fight back, but his strength always overpowered mine. I remember the nights I spent in my room, pressing my hands to my bruised arms, wishing for something, anything to stop the pain. And yet, through it all, I clung to a thread of hope that someday, somehow, things would change. That someone would see me, really see me, and believe me. The bullying wasn't just physical or verbal, it was calculated. He seemed to know exactly what would wound me, what would make me question my worth, what would isolate me further. Every insult, every blow, every threat was a tool to break me. And I often wondered why. Why me? Why not leave me alone? Was it my existence, my identity, my defiance in simply being myself that made me a target? I didn't understand, and the not understanding made it worse, gnawed at my mind like a relentless ache. I can still see myself at 12, 13, 14, learning the language of survival, learning which doors to lock, which windows to leave open, which rooms to avoid, learning how to walk silently, how to speak in ways that didn't provoke him. I learned that being quiet wasn't cowardice, was self-preservation. And still, no matter what I did, it wasn't enough. The attacks continued. The verbal cruelty escalated. The physical violence intensified. And I realized something terrifying. No one could save me but me. Not my parents, not my teachers, not my friends. I was alone. The early years of this abuse shaped me in ways I'm only beginning to understand. I became vigilant, distrustful, emotionally guarded. I learned to mask my fear with sarcasm, with humor, with everything except the truth. I learned to accept that the world could be cruel and that those closest to me might fail me. And through it all, I kept going, not because I was strong, necessarily, but because the alternative, giving up entirely, was too frightening to imagine, even in moments of fleeting peace. Like quiet afternoons when he wasn't around, I felt the shadow of him looming. I carried the weight of anticipating the next attack, the next insult, the next betrayal. And as I grew older, that shadow didn't shrink, it grew. It became a part of me, inseparable from who I was. The trauma became a lens through which I saw the world, a constant whisper that I was never safe, never enough, never truly loved. I tried to tell myself that if I survived, I could emerge stronger. But some days, the pain was so heavy, the fear so consuming, that survival felt like a hollow victory. Every bruise, every cut, every slur left scars that weren't visible but hurt all the same. And yet, somewhere inside, despite everything, a stubborn part of me refused to disappear, refused to let him completely erase me. That part of me, small and fragile, became my anchor, the reason I endured when all else seemed lost. Even now, looking back on those early years, I can feel the tension, the fear, the constant anticipation of the next blow. I can remember the moments when I thought I might die under his hands, and the strange, inexplicable relief when I survived. Those years taught me to be hyper-aware, to navigate danger, to protect myself in ways I didn't fully understand. And though I carry the scars still, those years also gave me a kind of resilience, a knowledge that I can endure more than I ever thought possible. After losing my best friend, I felt like the floor had fallen out from under me. I remember the first day I realized he was spending more time with my brother than with me. It was subtle at first, laughing a little too long at my brother's jokes. A text that came through late at night with him saying he was hanging with the guys. At first I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he didn't see the danger in my brother. Maybe he thought it was harmless fun. But deep down, I knew. I could see the way my brother's eyes glinted when my best friend walked in, like he had another ally in his constant campaign to torment me. And just like that, 2 years of friendship, the kind you thought would last forever, crumbled. I tried to fight it. I told myself not to take it personally. I told myself that if he truly cared about me, he would have chosen me. But I couldn't shake the betrayal. I had confided in him, trusted him, counted on him, and now he had joined forces with the very person who made my life unbearable. Every time I saw them together, laughing, joking, acting like the last few years had never happened, I felt a physical ache in my chest. It wasn't just hurt. It was anger, frustration, and disbelief all rolled into one. How could someone I loved so much choose my abuser over me? And then came the pressure from everyone around me. My parents, my brother's friends, my ex-best friend's parents. They all seemed to have opinions about what I should do, how I should react, whom I should protect. My parents, of course, were a mess. They wanted to appear supportive, but any mention of my sexual orientation made them uncomfortable. I could see the conflict in their eyes whenever they tried to advocate for me. It was half-hearted at best, and their anger often returned. A reminder that I was never really safe, even at home. My ex-best friend's parents were worse. They wanted me to speak on his behalf, to say he wouldn't have hurt me, to smooth over the history so their child could walk away unscathed. I remember sitting in their living room, my hands shaking, my chest tight, trying to explain the truth without shattering the fragile illusion they had built around their son. But the harder I tried, the more they pushed. They begged me, pleaded with me, almost demanding that I erase my experiences for their convenience. And I wanted to tell them everything, wanted to scream the truth at the top of my lungs, but I didn't. I had learned early on that speaking out could be dangerous, could make things worse. I stayed quiet, swallowed my pain, and let them twist the narrative as they saw fit. School wasn't much of a refuge either. Teachers knew something was wrong. Counselors tried to help, but it felt like a game to them, a matter of checkboxes and reports. CPS was involved, but their interventions were superficial. I sat through meetings, recounted stories, repeated the trauma, and watched as adults nodded, took notes, and promised change. Nothing ever came of it. I began to feel invisible, like my words had no weight, no consequence. The isolation grew heavier, the betrayal more acute, and I learned to retreat even further into myself. I had friends outside the chaos, small pockets of normalcy, but even they couldn't shield me from the storm. They couldn't protect me at home, couldn't fight the battles my parents wouldn't fight. I felt like a lone soldier, navigating a battlefield where the enemy was not just my brother, but the apathy, the half-hearted interventions, and the betrayals of those who should have stood by me. Every day was a struggle to maintain some sense of stability, to find small moments of peace in a life defined by chaos. The constant manipulation was exhausting. My brother had trained people around me to doubt me, to question my perspective, to see me as exaggerating, overreacting, or worse, lying. Even when I tried to explain the ongoing abuse, I was met with skepticism or dismissal. I realized that my reality was my own responsibility, that trusting others to see the truth would often only lead to disappointment. And so I became cautious, calculating my words, controlling my emotions, and learning the hard lesson that vulnerability could be weaponized against me. The isolation wasn't just emotional, it was practical. I had no safe place to go, no extended family willing to take in a gay teen, no adults I could fully trust. I was stuck in a cycle where every attempt to seek help or create distance from my abuser was met with resistance, disbelief, or outright hostility. I learned to navigate this terrain carefully, masking my fear with stoicism, my pain with forced humor, my despair with quiet endurance. And even when I thought I had found a friend, a confidant, someone who could break the isolation, betrayal would sneak in, reminding me that the world could be just as cruel as my home. Over time, I realized that isolation was as much a weapon as any physical blow. My brother didn't just want to hurt me physically. He wanted to remove all support, to sever the connections that might keep me grounded, to make sure I faced the world alone. And in that, he succeeded. I felt the crushing weight of solitude, the heavy expectation that I would navigate trauma without guidance or support. Friends could offer empathy, but they couldn't intervene when my life was in danger. Adults could offer advice, but their limitations made the counsel hollow. I was left to endure, to survive in a reality where trust was a risk, where speaking up could backfire, where being myself made me a target. I remember moments of quiet desperation, lying in my bed at night, staring at the ceiling, wishing someone would just acknowledge my suffering. I wished for the strength to fight back, to escape, to reclaim a sense of agency. But those wishes often collided with the reality of my situation. There was no easy escape, no magical rescuer, no immediate solution. The weight of betrayal, the suffocating presence of my abuser, the lack of support from those around MIT all compounded, creating a sense of hopelessness that I carried everywhere. And yet, even in this isolation, I found fragments of resilience, small victories, speaking my truth to a therapist, confiding in a caseworker, maintaining friendships even when they couldn't intervene directly. These moments were fragile, easily overshadowed by the overwhelming presence of betrayal and abuse. But they were proof that I could still assert some control over my life. They were proof that, even in the absence of external support, I could maintain a sense of identity, of self, of survival. Every encounter with betrayal, every glance from a parent that didn't align with my experience, every friend who sided with my abuser, every authority figure who failed to intervene taught me lessons in endurance. I learned to anticipate disappointment, to prepare for manipulation, to navigate relationships with a keen awareness of potential danger. And while these lessons were hard-earned, they equipped me with tools to survive the worst. I became adept at reading people, at predicting behavior, at maintaining emotional boundaries that kept me from breaking completely. Still, the emotional toll was relentless. Anxiety, fear, and hypervigilance became constant companions. I felt the pressure of living under scrutiny from all sides: my parents, my abuser, the adults who claimed to care, and even my peers who could not fully understand. I carried the weight of expectation, to endure, to survive, to remain okay even when nothing about my reality felt okay. And this pressure, this constant vigilance, was exhausting. It shaped my days, my nights, my thoughts, my dreams, and my sense of self. Even as I navigated the isolation and betrayal, I knew that my life would soon reach a breaking point. The undercurrent of tension, the accumulation of abuse, and the lack of real support had created a pressure cooker that could not hold forever. And I braced myself, without knowing exactly when, for the moment when everything would come to a head. The moment when the weight of solitude and betrayal would collide with the relentless force of my brother's violence, setting the stage for the events that would change everything. The summer started like any other, but it quickly became clear that things were about to spiral into something I couldn't contain. My brother's cruelty had always hovered on the edge of danger, but this time he went further. He cornered me near the lake behind our house, a place I had once gone to feel calm, to escape for just a few moments. I remember the smell of the water, the sound of the wind through the trees, and then the sudden, terrifying realization that I couldn't get away. He grabbed me, shoved me into the water, and held me down. I struggled, gasping for air, choking, trying to break free, but his strength was overwhelming. I felt the cold of the lake against my skin, the panic rising in my chest, and then the blur of my body hitting rocks as he let go. I survived, but I didn't escape unscathed. My arms and neck were covered in bruises and cuts. My head throbbed from impact. I was rushed to the hospital, where I spent 2 days recovering. But the physical wounds were only part of it. The fear, the betrayal, the realization that someone who was supposed to be family wanted to harm me so gravely had stayed with me, crawling beneath my skin, lingering long after the cuts had healed. While I was in the hospital, the police and CPS came to interview me. I remember the cold, official tone of the questions, the feeling of being dissected, of having every detail of my trauma picked apart. But finally, I had a platform where my voice could matter. I told them everything: the years of verbal abuse, the physical attacks, the isolation, the betrayal, the incidents that no one else had believed or acted upon. I told them the truth, raw and unfiltered. My parents predictably tried to intervene. They wanted to stop me from speaking, to convince the authorities that I was too young to understand, too confused, too emotional to be taken seriously. But the police made it clear, If I wanted to report the abuse, no one could stop me. For the first time, I felt a sense of agency that had been absent my entire life. My words could have consequences. My experiences could matter, and I spoke, not just for myself, but for the years of silence, for the trauma I had endured, for the moments when no one else had intervened. The legal process was complicated. My brother was arrested. His friends, including my ex-best friend, were interviewed and charged for either assisting him or knowing about his plans. And suddenly, my world was filled with new pressures. My parents, who had been ambivalent before, now hovered with anger and frustration. My ex-best friend's parents begged me to speak in his defense, to claim he couldn't have done anything wrong, to rewrite history so he could escape accountability. Every day, it felt like I was being pulled in multiple directions, forced to carry the weight of everyone else's convenience. Home became unbearable. The yelling, the arguments, the implicit threats from my parents, it was relentless. They didn't kick me out, not because they supported me, but because they feared legal consequences. CPS wouldn't remove me either. I was left in this limbo, navigating a household that was hostile and a system that could only offer so much protection. Therapy sessions provided some relief, a chance to speak with someone who listened without judgment, but they couldn't replace the absence of real safety, real family support. I was on my own, navigating the fallout of trauma while trying to hold onto some semblance of normalcy. And yet, even amidst all this, there was a part of me that questioned everything. I wondered if the world would have been easier, if everyone around me would have been happier, if my brother had succeeded in hurting me permanently. It was a dark thought, one I hated admitting even to myself, but it lingered in moments of despair, a testament to how deeply the trauma had penetrated my psyche. I struggled to find reasons to keep fighting when it felt like the people who were supposed to care the most, my parents, extended family, even some friends, were more invested in protecting themselves or their children than in supporting me. Yet, even in those darkest moments, I found fragments of resilience. My caseworker listened, even when others didn't. My therapist provided a safe space to process the chaos. Friends reached out, offering words of encouragement, reminders that I was not invisible, that my experiences mattered. And slowly, incrementally, I began to understand that survival wasn't just about enduring physical violence. It was about maintaining my sense of self, holding on to my identity, refusing to let the cruelty around me define who I was. I began to reclaim pieces of my life. Small things at first, walking through the neighborhood without flinching, spending time with friends without fear of interference, asserting my needs in therapy, refusing to be silenced. Each act, each decision was a declaration. I am more than the trauma, more than the betrayal, more than the violence inflicted upon me. I was learning that survival was not just about avoiding harm, it was about embracing agency, finding moments of joy, protecting my mind and heart even when the physical world felt dangerous. The process was grueling. The court proceedings, the interviews, the constant reminders of what had happened, it felt endless. And yet, there was a strange clarity in the chaos. I could see patterns, understand motives, recognize manipulation. I was learning to navigate a world that had once seemed entirely hostile, armed now with knowledge, experience, and a growing sense of self-preservation. I realized that while I couldn't control others' actions, I could control how I responded, how I protected myself, how I rebuilt my sense of safety and belonging. I also began to confront the complex feelings surrounding my ex-best friend. The betrayal cut deeply, and I grieved the loss of a relationship I had cherished. But I also recognized that forgiveness, or at least understanding, was necessary for my own peace. Holding on to anger and resentment kept me tethered to the past, prevented me from moving forward. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could reclaim my narrative, assert my truth, and refuse to let others' choices dictate my worth. In therapy, I started to explore the deeper layers of my trauma, the years of bullying, the isolation, the betrayal, the ongoing struggle with my parents. I confronted feelings I had buried for so long, the fear, the shame, the anger, and slowly began to process them. It wasn't linear. Some days were harder than others. Memories resurfaced unexpectedly, emotions surged without warning, and moments of despair still threatened to overwhelm me. But through it all, I was learning to acknowledge my pain without letting it define me, to honor my experiences without letting them consume me, to survive without simply existing in a state of constant fear. There were moments of small victories that reminded me I was more than my trauma. Walking to school without fear, laughing with friends without guilt, asserting boundaries with my parents, speaking openly with my caseworker and therapist. These moments were quiet, almost imperceptible, but powerful. They reminded me that despite everything, I was capable of agency, resilience, and growth. I was learning to build a life that wasn't defined solely by my brother's cruelty, by my parents' failures, or by the betrayals of those I had trusted. By the end of that summer, I had begun to reclaim my life in ways I hadn't thought possible. The legal process was ongoing, the family dynamics remained tense, and the road ahead was still fraught with challenges. But I had survived, and survival was not nothing. I had survived against odds that felt insurmountable, had navigated betrayal, violence, and isolation, and had emerged with a sense of self that was stronger, sharper, and more resilient than I had imagined. Even now, I carry the scars, both visible and invisible. They serve as reminders of the battles I fought, the moments I endured, and the strength I discovered within myself. And while the world may never fully understand the depth of my trauma, I have learned that my voice matters, my experiences matter, and my existence matters. I am more than the cruelty inflicted upon me. I am more than the betrayal. I am more than the violence. And slowly, one small step at a time, I am learning to live, to thrive, and to reclaim a sense of hope that had long seemed impossible.